Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video, I will be trying to sew it back. I bought a pattern. I've never followed one before. I've never sewn anything really before. I did try to sew in lining, but that was it. And today I'm gonna try and sew a bag. It is gonna be made out of a pair of jeans. I already cut it out, so this is just the leftovers. But yeah, it's gonna be made out of jeans I don't wear anymore. I also will be needing a lining fabric, which I already had as well, and it kind of goes with this blue pair of jeans, so that's what I'm gonna use. And the only thing that I had to buy is this
wadding.
So basically what it does, it makes your piece a bit thicker, gives a lot more structure to it, and this is what you do use if you want to quilt your bag. So that's the only thing I bought. If you also want to make this bag, I will leave the pattern in description down below, where I bought it and the designer that made this pattern as well. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video. So first things first, I had to cut out my pattern pieces so I can then cut my fabric, and I did try to use this rotary cutter, but it was so bad. I don't know if it's the bad quality of it, but anyway, switched to scissors, but then it also was kind of tricky, so I then went ahead and traced it instead using just a regular pen. But I did order some fabric markers because I do plan to sew in the future. But yeah, this worked fine for the time being, but make sure that you are drawing on the wrong side. But yeah, tracing the pieces and then cutting them out worked best for me. And I did have to cut my main outer layer in two pieces because I didn't have the whole piece of fabric. But once that was done, I then went ahead and tried again my rotary cutter to cut out the wadding, which is going to be the inside layer, giving more structure to the bag. But then again, I did struggle to cut it out or use the rotary cutter, so again I traced it out. This does seem to be the easiest way, and it worked, even though it was a bit hard to draw with the pen on the wadding. But yeah, once I cut two pieces of the wadding, I had to cut out my lining, which was by far the easiest part. I even had it doubled so I can cut two pieces at the same time. Now looking back at it, I could even left it folded in half and do not cut the bottom because I still will need to sew that. Anyway, it's now too late. Anyway, I'm finally done cutting out all the pieces, and this means I'm gonna get to sewing now. And as you can probably tell, I had to sew my front pieces together because they were separated into twos, and then it was time to add the wadding. If you want a tip from me, use loads of pins and go slowly on your sewing machine. This is gonna help you keep the line straight and also minimize any mistakes that you can possibly make by just speeding up. And yeah, you can see me going very slowly. I do remove all the pins along the way, and I'm just going slowly with that straight line. When you do reach your corner, another tip that I can give is basically, if your needle is not in your work, turn the dial and make sure the needle is in, then lift your foot and slowly rotate your work. By doing this, you can make sure that your sewing line is all in one and basically doesn't end at a random point. But yeah, I had to sew the wadding onto the both outer layer pieces. I repeated it twice. I mean, my lines aren't that straight, but it's good enough for me considering the fact that it's my first time sewing, so I'm trying not to be too hard on myself. I also added my logo, which I had, and then it was time to secure those two pieces together to sew around the sides and the bottom. And by this point, it was quite thick fabric to sew, even though my sewing machine is Jeans Pro and I'm able to sew thicker fabrics, but you want to make sure you are using correct needle for the fabric of choice. And this is how my outer layer pieces are looking like sewn together. I was so happy how it looked. It looked so professional, even though you could still see some mistakes. But then I went ahead, I had to sew my both pieces. This was super easy process. You just go ahead and make a straight line, removing the pins along the way. And another tip when sewing, especially small pieces that are folded together, you want to iron them. It's gonna help you maintain the shape. It's gonna help that piece to stay the way you want, and it's gonna be also easier to sew. So that's what I did as well. Now, turning the fabric inside out was by far the most difficult part. I did not have the fabric turner, if you know what I mean. I did order it now, but then I was using my Tunisian crochet hook because it's quite long, and then I was also able to punch a hole into my fabric to try and turn it inside out. It was super hard because the extra bulkiness where I stitched the pieces together was making it extra hard, but at the end I was able to do it. Even though there was parts that ripped apart, I just sewed them at the end. Even though I wasn't happy with how the bows turned out, I can always just crochet some bows and replace them instead. Now, by the time I finished rambling about the bows, I also finished my strap. I just sewed lining on and then turned it inside out, which was much easier. And then I attached the straps to the bag itself on both sides. And finally, I had to sew my lining along the sides and the bottom, leaving about 4-inch gap so I can turn it inside out once it's sewn to the bag. Once the lining was done, I basically put my bag into the lining, pinned along all the edges and sewed it together. I didn't show this, but I also top stitched when it was done, but this was after I turned it inside out. Now, sewing the lining to the bag probably isn't the easiest part, but if you do go slowly, manage all the curves and try to keep the same length from the edge, it's gonna turn out okay because you are sewing the lining which is gonna be turned inside out, so you won't be able to see the stitching. But yeah, the key to everything is just to go slowly, remove the pins, go in those little sections, which I did here, and just slowly turn your bag all around. And I keep calling them pins, but they are actually clips, which are also so much easier than pins itself, especially for multiple of layers of fabric. So I would suggest to use those if you have. But yeah, I was slowly coming to an end of sewing the lining to the bag and it was time to turn it inside out. Don't ask me, this does look like a witchcraft because through that small hole in your lining, you're actually pulling your bag out and it doesn't make sense. I can't comprehend how it works, but it does and it looks very nice. All you have to do is stitch the hole in lining that you have left off by just simply folding the edges inside and doing straight stitch. Once I turned my bag inside out, which was a bit struggle to do the handles, but they do come out nicely, it was time to add the bows, which is not in this video. Sorry, but I did attach the fabric to the sides of the bag, just tie the bows and that was it. Again, like I said before, I did top stitching around the bag just to make sure the lining doesn't come out on the right side. And this is what it looks all finished up. I am quite happy about it. I think it did turn out great as first time sewing. I'll probably want to add the magnetic things so it can shut and stay this way, because if you do put something in, it's just gonna be that way. So I think with that magnetic clip it's gonna be so much better. This is how the lining is looking like. I think it looks so good and professional apart from some points. This is where I wasn't able to sew because it's very thick and I also broke my needle once. So yeah, I didn't sew through this part, I left it this way. And yeah, I also added my own label here at the front. And probably the hardest part was to make those bows, just because my fabric is so thick. Even though there is thicker pattern included for when you use thicker fabric, I did go with the smaller one just because I didn't have enough fabric altogether, and it was difficult to kind of turn it inside out just because it's so thick. Another thing that didn't help me is just because I didn't have the fabric in all one piece, I had to cut either 2 pieces or 3 pieces. For one I did 2, for the other I did 3. And when you do sew them together, it also adds extra thickness, but at the end I was able to turn them inside out. You probably saw me struggling, and this is how it looks all together. Now the corners, they both should line up like this. Obviously I made mistake once again by cutting the corner of just the bag while I had to, push the corner this way and then sew it, but this one didn't turn as nice. I'm not mad about it. I still think it looks good overall. Plus, it was the first time, so yeah, this is how it looks. But yeah, if you want to give it a go, please do, because if I was able to do it, you can do too. And if you do try, let me know. I would love to see how yours turn out. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe, like this video, and I'll see you in my next one.